Welcome to the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. We're excited to bring you Season 3 of new episodes featuring in-depth content across Singapore, ASEAN and the United Kingdom. We've had some extraordinary guests on our channel, including Formula One's Claire Williams.
I'm a firm believer that any great team, any successful team has a great culture flowing through it. You aren't successful if you don't. So we put a lot of work into this.
Renowned mountaineer Kenton Cool.
There, 2019, there with a client, a big storm came in and literally destroyed Camp 2. And I got some video footage of Sherpas like trying to hold on to the tent fabric as it blows away. And
the Royal Navy's Commodore Steve Morehouse, commander of the UK Carrier Strike Group.
The squadron of F-35 aircraft we have on board is a Royal Air Force squadron, and the personnel there are drawn from both the Navy and the Air Force. So, what better way of showing just the efficiency and the joined-up nature that we now have.
And distinguished Sky News anchor Jeremy Thompson.
We had two little vans with satellite links, and we leapfrogged up the road to Pristina, the capital, throughout that first day, with non-stop coverage from basically inside a war zone.
We also sit down with the likes of TikTok, Twitch and Twitter and continue to bring you conversations around business and trade, leadership and people, sustainability, sports and arts and much, much more. Thank you, as always, for your support and we hope you enjoy this podcast. Hello and welcome to the latest instalment of In Conversation with me, David Kelly. In this series, we meet senior business leaders and ask questions to find out more about them, their business, challenges, experiences, and more to give you, our listeners, more insight from the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's community. Today is absolutely no exception, as my guest not only advises venture capital, private equity and infrastructure investors, family offices and international organisations on corporate transactions across a range of sectors, but also is highly experienced in structuring, negotiating and executing complex cross-border investments. But not only that, not only is he a partner at Watson Farley and Williams LLP here in Singapore, but he has served the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore for more than 15 years, variously as a business group chair, secretary, an elected board member for 8 years, and as a vice president with oversight of all the facets of member engagement and a particular focus on governance, returning to the board in 2020. Having been so engaged in the business community and the wider chamber, this month he became the president of the British Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore. It really is my great pleasure to welcome Damian Adams, partner at Watson Farley Williams and president of the British Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore. Damian, a hugely warm welcome and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, David, and for that glowing introduction.
Oh no, fabulous! It's really, really good to have you with us, and really, really exciting to be with you on the journey of the chamber. But I guess just before we sort of get started, it'll be great to get to know a little bit about you. How long have you been in Singapore for, and what was it first that brought you here?
That's a good question, and it makes me catch myself every time I have to answer that, because it's now been 22 years and a bit and counting. Wow. So it's been a long time. It's the longest I've ever remained in one place, and it's pretty much my entire career has been spent in Singapore. What first brought me here was a 3-month project, and it seems to be a story that is more common than you might expect, is that people come out for a short-term gig in Singapore and end up staying. So my original plan was to be here for 3 months, pretty much fresh out of London and fresh off the boat. That developed into 6 months and a year and 2 and 3 and 5 and 7, and at some point I guess I must have just stopped counting, and here we are today.
Fabulous. Well, it's great to have you with so much history here as well. It would be remiss of me not to sort of mention a little bit about your work at Watson Farley Williams. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit more about what you do with WFW and how you support your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess just to put it in context to begin with, we are a London headquartered international law firm. No stranger to the Singapore legal community. There are many international law firms. We are one of those that does cross-border transactions, focusing on this part of the world. We have a particular focus in certain sectors, among them energy, transport, and real estate. So we work with big organizations, banks, private equity investors, funds, and of course individuals as well, doing cross-border transactions, disputes, financings, regulatory work, and the like. The part that I play in that is on the corporate side. So I'm a corporate transactional lawyer. What that basically boils down to is that I help businesses with mergers and acquisitions, with investments, with joint ventures, as you mentioned earlier in the introduction, with investors of all types on early stage funding, on later stage funding, and similarly with their investments and joint ventures and so on. So a pretty broad portfolio. Most of what I do is in this part of the world. There's always a Southeast Asia nexus to it, but inevitably being an international organization, I get the opportunity to work with clients from all over the world and not just in Asia itself. Yeah, that's a snapshot, if you like, of what I do and what we do more broadly.
And within those sort of 22 years, David, have you seen sort of that landscape change in terms of sort of M&A and companies seeking access to capital in slightly different ways? And because it seems to be quite an exciting space, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's ever evolving. I mean, I think, have I seen it change? Not necessarily change as such. I think probably, I mean, there has always been appetite for transactions and investments in this part of the world, certainly from overseas buyers. I mean, there's the internal domestic or regional domestic market, if you like, of companies, businesses acquiring or divesting in this part of the world for their business in this part of the world. But more broadly, obviously international organizations looking to put boots on the ground for the first time, either organically or by acquiring an existing business. I mean, I think we've seen through the last decade, I would say, probably certainly an increased appetite for businesses in Southeast Asia. I mean, it wouldn't have escaped the notice of many that Southeast Asia has been very much in the spotlight from a venture capital perspective, and there are lots and lots of businesses in the startup space, startups and scale-ups who are fast developing and transforming not just their own countries, but the region as a whole. And so we've certainly seen far more appetite and interest from overseas investors, and the UK, of course, among them in that respect. So it's been a maturing region. I mean, 2 decades of experience, I've certainly seen it mature and become more sophisticated and certainly internationalized to the point that it is at today.
Oh, really excellent. I know that you and I have been sort of getting our heads together around sort of where the Chamber plays a part going forwards. And I guess just turning to that, 15 years involvement with the Chamber. Wow, absolutely incredible. When and why did you first become involved with the British Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore?
That's a really good question. And I'm glad that you've reminded me that it was 15 years, because to be honest, I was struggling to count precisely when I became involved and how long I have been involved. And it surprises me and shocks me at the same time, but all in a good way. The first involvement I had was entirely social, was through social circles. And bear in mind, I was 22 years younger at the time, or 20 years younger at the time. So my life was in a very different place with fewer responsibilities. But at the time, the Chamber had a very successful, I hesitate to call it youth club, but it was definitely a much younger demographic of the Chamber that was less involved in the boardroom and more involved in socializing. And the entire premise of that was basically to provide a landing point for like-minded professionals, 20-somethings who were coming to Singapore for the first time, who wanted to basically plug into an immediate network. And for anyone listening to this who knows Singapore and how it works, for people coming to work and live in Singapore, it's not a difficult place to make contacts. But BritCham or BritPac, at the time, that part of the Chamber was very much geared towards facilitating that social connection. Truth be told, it's a good excuse to meet like-minded people after work, to have a drink and socialize. And that was the starting point. I probably was a consumer of that to begin with, of that proposition, and then became more interested in getting involved in the organization and being involved in organization of things, in volunteering for groups to facilitate those sorts of things has always been something I've been interested in. And so that was really the genesis of my involvement. That's where it all began.
Oh, brilliant. And then since then you became a business committee chair. I think you were chair of the membership committee at the time as well. You've been a board member, you've been a vice president as well. You sit with quite a lot of sort of heritage of the Chamber over the last sort of 15 years or so. And you must have seen some huge changes and the role of the Chamber sort of plays during that time. How have you seen it sort of evolve over that time? And how do you think the Chamber can sort of remain relevant and support businesses in the region going forwards?
You're absolutely right. It has changed a lot. I think the one constant has been the fact that it is, as a Chamber of Commerce, it is a network of individuals representing organizations, and they are there for networking, for connection, for business opportunities. I mean, that core tenet really hasn't changed. And I think that's a good thing, because that's really the mission of the Chamber. I think what has transformed dramatically over the years, and the last 2 years even more so, accelerated by COVID, of course, is the way in which it's delivered on that mission. And I think it's fair to say, and this is without any disrespect to any chambers the British Chamber included. There's probably back in the day some long-held assumptions that chambers of commerce are little more than talking shops and where people get together and have a beer and what's really done in the chamber context. I think the British Chamber in Singapore in particular could be no further from that perception if it tried. I mean, there is definitely that connection social angle to it, but where there have been vast changes and really evolution is in the delivery. So from focused business groups. I mean, the business committees really being the engine room. I mean, the fact that it's not just chamber team or the board, but there are some really, really committed groups representing industry or representing themes within industry or particular initiatives or campaigns. That's one massive driver for the chamber's activities. The content piece, gosh, if you speak in the last 20 years, the digital world has accelerated and really permeates everything. But the ability of the chamber to capitalize on that, to really produce good quality content that's relevant, up to the minute, means something, helps members, puts it all in one place. Those sorts of initiatives are far removed from 10, 15, 20 years ago, certainly. Similarly, I would say the dialogue with government. The chamber in of itself is not or at least in the British Chamber context, has never been a political lobbying platform. It doesn't do massive political outreach to achieve a certain outcome on behalf of any particular constituents. But it does have an important role to play in providing that bridge between commerce and industry and government, because of course rules and regulations that define how we operate are relevant to businesses in all parts of the region. And so I think providing that lens through which to look, that channel with which to speak to government representatives has been, transformational, I would say. Obviously we can touch on that in a little more detail. And the last thing I would say is probably the value proposition around services. What can the chamber provide? Again, if you go back to the sort of long-held perception that a chamber is perhaps just an opportunity to get together after a day in the office, much more than that. Certainly from event organisation, facilitation for members, trade services, the participation that the chamber's had in the Overseas Business Network Initiative over the last few years in partnership with DIT really has allowed the chamber to step up its game in terms of the services it delivers. So it's not just a place for people to congregate or a forum or a network. It's really a service delivery partner. In many ways, it's a provider of professional services to allow businesses to further their ambitions in the region. So, I think I counted 4 things there, but I would say those are probably the key things that spring to mind in terms of how the chamber has developed over the years.
Oh, really, really, really great to hear that journey. And I think you're stepping into you stepped into the role of president at a really exciting time where COVID restrictions are easing, significantly easing, and travel is coming back. Can you share a little bit to our listeners and our members about what you hope to bring to the chamber in your role and what you hope to sort of achieve throughout your tenure as the chamber president?
Yes, it's a great question to ask and a challenging one to answer, but I'll do my best to do it justice. I'm following in the footsteps, it must be said, of someone who's had the unenviable task of steering the chamber in the role of president through the most difficult past 2 years. So thanks, huge kudos to Richard Warburton for his efforts in that respect. And it would be remiss of me not to mention him. I've got big shoes to fill. And what would I seek for the chamber and look to leave as its president in time to come from now? I think in even better a position than it is right now. That has to be the first most obvious thing. I think the more challenging question around that is how to achieve that. I think I've to some extent got what some people might call an easy layup shot, because we are back to networking. One hopes, and fingers crossed, nothing is written in stone, but the direction of travel is going the right way. If you just look at Singapore in of itself, everywhere's busier. People are out and about. Networking has become a novelty. People are rediscovering the point of business cards and yet forgetting to carry them with them, myself included. There's definitely a big, bright, shining light at the end of the tunnel that has been the past 2 years. So in terms of delivering on the chamber's ability to get people together, I think the role is relatively easy. It will handle itself. And that's what I really want to see obviously happen, is we make full use of the opportunities to do just that. If we go back to what I said earlier, the networking opportunity, the connections being the core tenet of what a chamber can do and should do well, we've got the best following wind we can have to actually optimize and to make best use of that. So I think that's to some extent an easy win. In terms of other things, again, I think it's a build. I think this is evolutionary, not revolutionary, in terms of how I see the chamber developing and my role in helping it to develop. Again, 2 things that I mentioned as big developments, which I think we have the fantastic opportunity to capitalize on, would be our engagement with government. And by that, I mean in the broad sense, both UK government and Singapore government. I mean, our relationship with the IT, the High Commission and UK Gov in its broadest sense has, I think it's safe to say, never been stronger. There is good dialogue, there is good regular engagement, there is an understanding of our respective missions, pressures, deliverables, and the part that we have to play in representing UK as a product and UK businesses and the offering that they have. So I think strengthening that, continuing to build on that, being receptive to that, working with the team, and huge thanks to obviously High Commissioner Cara Owen and to Trade Commissioner Natalie Black as well for their efforts in working with them and their teams on an ongoing basis will be critical to the success of that mission. Of course, the other side of that is on the SG Gov side. And what I would say is that it's been evident in the past 2 years, circumstances notwithstanding, that monumental efforts have been made to get closer to the respective ministries within Singapore government and to understand similarly their missions and their pressures. I think we find ourselves in a great place where we've got a good foundation, a really solid foundation with the various different departments and ministries of having a good foundation for dialogue. We've got great dialogue, we've got ongoing, dare I say, without sounding too sycophantic, David, it's in no small part thanks to you and your team and the efforts in that respect that we have that position. And I think to build on that as we go forward will be really important as well. I mean, that again is a key proposition or offering that we have to businesses coming out here from the UK. How can they navigate Singapore in particular and the region in general? An ability to understand how government departments function and what policy represents and how you navigate policy is key to that. So I think certainly those two aspects, and we have great opportunity as far as that's concerned, in as much as we've seen recent ministerial visits from the likes of Lord Sarvaraz, who's the recently appointed trade envoy for Singapore out of the UK. We also look forward to various dates in the diary upcoming with respectively Natalie Black, with Jacqueline Poe, who's the managing director of EDB, with Minister Lawrence Wong. There's lots in the agenda, and it really serves to demonstrate that we are, I think, furthering that agenda really well in terms of government connection and dialogue. And then that leads me to the third thing, which is linked. And again, I have mentioned this before, but I think it's a great opportunity in having demonstrated what we've done before as a chamber and what we can do going forward. And that would be the experience and the lessons learned out of the OBNI. So the Overseas Business Network initiative that was run by DIT, with whom we had a contract for a number of years, was a new, and some might say experimental model to see how service delivery could be offered effectively by private or non-government sector. That particular contract has come to an end, but it has left us having learned a great many lessons in terms of what the chamber can deliver on, what services are required or appreciated by members or by potential members, what we can deliver and how we might do even more to augment the networking connection piece that we offer. So reimagining that, looking at the next chapter of that in the chamber context, seeing how we can build on the lessons learned and the experiences that we've gained, and developing a new business model, if you like, for that will be something to focus on very much in the next several months. So looking forward to seeing what we can do there. And I think all of that just serves to really reinforce our relevance across a number of different key areas, which is pretty unique, actually. If I look at it, I can't really imagine or think of another organization that has looking at all those different things to the level of detail that the chamber really is.
Amazing. And it's a really exciting time, isn't it? I mean, just hearing you talk about that, putting the chamber into a better position post last couple of years, that evolutionary build around government and then supporting trade and certainly the small businesses as well. We've got a really sort of good service offering. I think it's a really exciting time to be part of the British Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore, isn't it?
It is, and in no small part because we have that opportunity to be in person and face to face. But I think it's more than just that. I think it's almost like the floodgates have been unlocked and people are really busting to get out and to get on with things. I mean, I think 2020 as a whole felt like people were sort of holding their breath and working out what happens, when is this all going to come to an end, when will business as usual be resumed. That didn't happen. So 2021, people got used to a new norm. 2022, I think to some extent the challenge will be, okay, so we've got this opportunity, but there are so many headwinds globally, geopolitically, in all sorts of ways. How do we pick up where we left off, but do so in perhaps a slightly different, maybe slightly more responsible way, slightly more sustainable way? How do we really take advantage of the opportunities that exist? And it's no secret. I mean, much has been said in the past of the 20s being the decade for Southeast Asia, and I think that still very much rings true. there is an abundance of opportunity, not without challenge in some respects, but still an abundance of opportunity in this part of the world. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it is a great time to be involved with the Chamber, and the Chamber is in a great position to take advantage of that as well.
Oh, super. I'm really keen to sort of get your views on two of our biggest sort of stakeholders that we both collectively work with, Damian. And one is the board, or the Chamber Committee, as it's called in our constitution, who act as an amazing framework, don't they, in terms of really representing our members, but also the business committees as well. And I know you've been involved in a number of those in the past as well. So can you just give me a bit of a flavour, and our listeners a bit of a flavour around the Chamber board that's around you, because they're a really important infrastructure and they really do represent members incredibly well, but also the power of that sort of the heartbeat of the business committees that you touched on earlier as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And advance thanks to the board for their contribution over the term to come. First of all, thanks to the past board for their efforts up to the April AGM. So the board is very much representative of really a cross section of the membership, and it's good that it has turned out that way. I mean, it's both representative of big, perhaps well-known household names, large organizations, MNCs, but equally of perhaps lesser well-known but vitally important SMEs and smaller businesses. And similarly, if you look at the involvement of the board members in the Chamber, I think we've ended up with a very good cross-section this year of those who have continuity in the workings of the Chamber at a board level, whether through their involvement in boards of years past or through committees, but equally bringing up some new committee members who are able to basically step from those roles into the board role and see a little bit more about how the Chamber operates in the general, as opposed to specifically through the workings of the business committee. And that's deliberate. I mean, we made some constitutional changes last time around, precisely to make sure that we were able to capitalize on the experience of committee members to bring them effectively up to board level, or to also pave a way or a path for their candidacy for board election. And that has borne success. We've seen a number of committee members being elected to the board, but they've done so without relinquishing their committee hats. And that's important, that they're able to effectively serve two roles, because it provides a vital link and connection between the workings of the committee and the workings of the broader board. So the business committees function very much within focused themes or industries. The board is obviously at a higher level, overseeing, stewarding workings of the Chamber as a whole, but making sure that those two levels are linked is really important. And I think it also provides the visibility between the two, both to the committees as to what the board is thinking in terms of more strategic goals, and likewise to the board of what the committees are doing at a slightly more granular level, focus on certain themes or deliverables that the Chamber is looking to push, be it in relation to campaigns around sustainability or future of trade or future of work, or even specific industry response, whether it be energy and utilities or marketing or whatever. So yeah, really good group of individuals who have been elected to the board this year. Looking forward to really getting stuck in and working with the Chamber team as we come into this new term.
Super. And across the board and that sort of representation of members in the committees, we've got 5 brilliant themes, haven't we, around commerce first and foremost, around doing business, helping companies to trade, around people and making sure you've got access to the right talent in your business, around diversity and inclusion and the richness of the workforce, future skills and education, and sustainability. And those things run all the way through. They permeate through all of the key areas of what we do more broadly. But sustainability is something that the Chamber has taken really seriously, hasn't it? Having gone carbon neutral in 2019, we've just released our latest sustainability report, which links all of our activities to the UN's SDGs. It's so important to what we do. Why is it important within your role as the president that we keep championing this?
It's important because there's no escaping it, and it's a responsibility of all of us, an individual, personal, family, societal, professional level, I think, to have that top of mind, but also to really understand what that means. I mean, it's very easy to talk about the need to be sustainable, the need for sustainability, but I think actually demystifying that and understanding what that translates to in day-to-day life is part of the challenge. I mean, you're right, the badge wearing that the Chamber has in terms of its carbon neutral status for the past 2-3 years is important, but you don't just get that because you fill in a form and tick some boxes. It takes some effort, it takes some action. Working with members to achieve that goal is a really good representation of how the Chamber can benefit from its members, and likewise how members can contribute to the chamber, and so it becomes quite circular. But equally, that then provides to some extent a playbook or a template. We have the knowledge hubs, we have content within that allows people to actually understand what it is they need to do, what they need to focus on, how they can achieve this. And I think all too often, we can get caught up in, to some extent, the buzzwords. We know it's important. We know that net zero 2050 is the goal. We know that we need to do more, but the question is, okay, so what do you do? How can you actually bring that to bear from an individual or an organization level? And really, to my mind, it goes back to that power of networking and social connecting. We can learn from one another in those forums. So the sustainability piece is really important, and actually just reflecting on the report that was produced. And I do urge people to go to the website and download that and have a look, www.BritCham.org.sg. That is a great example of where we take this seriously. But I think, looking forward, what I observe just in daily life, what people seem to be talking about quite a lot at the moment is, are you traveling? Have you traveled? When will you next travel? We all want to travel. We've had 2 years of effectively hibernation, and now we've, got this opportunity to unleash ourselves on the world once again. But the question is, do you take stock within the context of sustainability and plan those meetings here, there, and everywhere? Do you bounce around the region filling your diary, or do you think a little bit more concertedly about how you might bring sustainability to your travel plans? Those are sorts of things that, to me, boil down to, okay, so if we talk about sustainability, how do I bring that to bear from an individual perspective? How do I think more thoughtfully about what I might do? So yeah, I think it's and as I said at the beginning, it's not going away. It's not just a buzzword. It's not a short-term campaign. It's important for businesses to understand what they can do. It's important for the chamber to be able to serve a purpose in helping them to navigate that landscape, and really to embed it as a key part of how the chamber operates, how businesses operate, how we operate generally. Because without that, we're not going to find ourselves moving along a path towards achieving those goals.
Oh no, super, really good to hear that, and we're all fully behind it as well. Before we move out of Singapore and think about ASEAN, you mentioned earlier around that government engagement, both with the Singapore government and the stat boards here, but also the UK government here at Post through the British High Commission team. Can you just sort of crystallise some of those relationships that we have, and where members are sort of getting the benefit from our close working relationships with both the UK government and the Singapore government? Because I noticed, when we sort of had our AGM, there was one slide in there that you and I talked about around sort of the iceberg, that sometimes some of the stuff we see is great and it's what members sort of want, and it helps them with their businesses. But there's a huge amount of stuff that happens underneath the waterline that we work on collectively, both through the board and the committees and the chamber team more broadly. Can you just sort of crystallise some of those relationships and how it helps members?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good that you mentioned that work of the unsung heroes, if you like, the work that goes on underneath the waterline. Yeah, how I think it crystallizes in practical terms for members is that purely from an external visibility standpoint, into opportunities for dialogue. So there's an enormous amount of work that goes into seeking opportunities for engagement and dialogue, actually bringing those to bear in the form of events, roundtables, seminars, webinars, as we've seen, business lunches, but really capitalizing on the appetite of government. And it's, to be honest, it's both UK Gov and Singapore Gov to get out there and actually connect with business, understanding the challenges. So bringing a closer degree of proximity is one of the main ways that it sort of translates for members, I think. And that, to my mind, I've always been, and I still am, even in this role, amazed at some of the stuff that the chamber can pull off in that respect. Singapore is slightly unique insofar as, there is obviously a greater degree of immediacy in any event because it's a much smaller community, but the chamber plays really well on that to the benefit of all insofar as it allows for that two-way dialogue. And we really do see it as an opportunity for two-way dialogue. So the biggest thing I would say is how that hard work under the surface translates for members is the sort of money can't buy events, the opportunities for dialogue, people in the room, discussions, engagement, hearing precisely what pressures, concerns, drivers there are behind particular policies, behind particular initiatives, that opportunity to challenge, debate, question, and get answers to those questions. In a nutshell, that's really important.
I remember sort of when I sort of had my journey into Singapore, working for a small organisation, and I can't remember who it was, but said, Singapore's always going to be the lily pad for the wider ASEAN region, and they were right. I used the chamber to connect through the wider network, which really helped me with my previous role. And the chamber is part of a network called Britain in Southeast Asia, which is sort of the collection of British chambers in the ASEAN region. How important do you think this is for businesses, and how can the Chamber play a bigger part in terms of supporting sort of member mobility across the region and supporting UK companies looking to access the wider market through Singapore?
Two questions there. How important is it? I think it's vitally important, because as you say, Singapore is not the start and finish of any company's journey in this part of the world. It is a springboard. It's the most logical place, some might say, to be. It has all the benefits, and I needn't extol the virtues of Singapore, but it is a great place to set up and from which to expand. And it's the natural landing point for a great many businesses who come to this part of the world. So that is a key part of the success story. But yes, you're right. I mean, as a springboard for wider engagement within the region, that really is the goal of a lot of businesses, and we support that. I mean, the chamber plays a vital role through that BISIA network, through its relationship with other chambers, equally through being able to, I think, have that dialogue, use that dialogue with the UK Gov, if you like, and the British High Commission to equally, get access to counterparts in the region. So, really leveraging that network both from a chamber perspective and from a High Commission perspective. So it's very important. I think certainly insofar as visibility on what other chambers are doing, in the opportunity to engage with those chambers through trips and visits and ongoing dialogue. I think the opportunity and challenge that we as a chamber here have is how we can bring that engagement even closer together, how we can really leverage those connections, how we can make them more visible, how we can extract more value or provide more value for members out of that. And it's no easy task. I mean, ASEAN is a diverse, population diverse, geographically diverse, fragmented region with a lot of disparity. Countries sit along a spectrum, and similarly, navigating that landscape is not without its challenges. But as much as we can do to make that journey smoother, and by operating in cooperation with other chambers, I think that's something that we have an opportunity to really try and do in the months and years to come, is to see how we can more broadly grow that network. And that really changes the game, if you like, in terms of Singapore as a landing point and springboard for the region, because if you can do that through the chamber here and then use that as a launch pad for more broader engagement, then I think that really serves businesses very well in terms of furthering their regional ambitions.
So for someone looking at Singapore as a potential place for them to do business or to set up, have you got any sort of tickets of advice that you might be able to offer them?
Don't think twice. No, that sounds rather glib, but I think, Singapore itself over the years has achieved remarkable success in becoming more visible, in familiarizing itself with overseas investors, with companies. I think there's a lot more. The world has got smaller before it shut down in 2020, and I think Singapore has very firmly put itself on the map as a great place to start, a great place to be, a great place to do business, a great place to set up. I mean, it's very well serviced by so many professional organizations who can help with a range of services to help businesses start. I mean, certainly I would say unashamedly that the chamber is a great landing point for that, because it has the instant network, the connections, the referral opportunities, the contacts, within its collective knowledge. And as I say, we've seen that in the past. I mean, that's a model that's proven itself through sort of the trade services angle. But the tip, I would say, or the one thing I would probably say to businesses who are looking to establish here is just to get involved and ask questions. There is little that you could do wrong than by asking questions as to how to proceed and how best to navigate your way out here in the first place. And it's relatively easy. I mean, it's a lot simpler than I think some might give credit for in terms of being able to establish here and set up. And certainly there are processes to be navigated and so on, but it's pretty frictionless in my experience, and it has only improved over the years. So it's a great landing point, certainly for businesses looking to set up.
Super. I mean, Damian, and I know the team and I are really, really looking forward to working with you. I mean, we've heard about your journey to Singapore. We've heard about your role within Watson Farley and Williams. We've heard about your chamber experience and your dedication to the chamber over the last 15 plus years. Your role as president of the board and the committees being the heartbeat of what goes on, sustainability, the government engagement, and the wider ASEAN piece that the chamber plays. It'll be good to hear a little bit about you. I mean, what do you do when you haven't got your day job hat on or your chamber hat on? How do you spend time?
I hadn't thought you might ask me that. I'd have to have it's not a long list of not a hugely long list of things. It's relatively simple. Running is my go-to.
Right.
That's where I find my headspace. I mean, I'm very fortunate to live down by the southern ridges, and we've got the benefit of hills and heat. So running is always good for that. Family life inevitably takes up a large part, and with that, for anyone that has kids, family life largely means at weekends running errands and being taxi driver. So there's that aspect to it. Yeah, there's probably not much more to it than that, to be honest. It's amazing how much shorter the days seem to be these days, but with professional duties, chamber duties, family duties, spousal duties, and duty to myself, that's probably enough things on the agenda on a daily and weekly basis.
No, absolutely, and I hope we make the journey for you a little bit easier as well from your presidential tenure perspective. But there is one question we ask every single guest on this series, and that's: if we could offer you the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's time machine, and with all the experience that you've got and the knowledge that you've earned and the learnings that you've taken with you throughout your career and your personal life, if we could offer you that time machine and you could take yourself back to a point in your life or your career where, with all of the stuff that you know now, you go and tell a younger self a nugget of information to help them in their future, when would you go back and tell yourself that something, and what would that something be?
Gosh, you've sprung that one upon me. That's a real kicker. I would say, and this is going to sound incredibly self-serving, I would say if it were my younger self or someone in my position who had an opportunity to do precisely what I did, that opportunity being to come out to this part of the world, I would honestly say seize it by the scruff of the neck and take that opportunity. I never thought for a minute that I'd be here for longer than 3 months, or at best 6 months. I had lived overseas for short periods in the past, but this really blows them all out of the water. And quite honestly, the richness of experience, the sheer diversity of talent that I've had the opportunity to meet and work with, certainly from a professional perspective, I don't think I would have got the same level of responsibility so early on in my career as I did, because in this part of the world, I think you tend to just pick it up and get on with it. There is a very much a can-do attitude. Stuff gets done, people are engaging, community helps one another, things happen. And I think, if I hadn't taken that opportunity, I would have missed that. That would have bypassed me. And I don't think I would be in a bad place right now, but I don't think I would be in as good a place as I am right now. So it might, as I say, sound a bit self-serving, but yeah, I mean, if you have an opportunity to jump, take it. You never know where it might end up.
Super. Damian, thank you so much for joining us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you over the last 3 years at the Chamber. I know the team have as well. I'm really looking forward to your tenure as president. I think we've got some really exciting things on the horizon and can't wait to get stuck in, really. So thank you so much for sharing your journey and a little bit of the future of where you see the Chamber through your crystal ball. It's been fabulous to talk to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much indeed for the opportunity.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the British Chamber's podcast. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, and why not leave us a rating and review on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the other podcast platforms. For more information, please visit our website at www.britcham.org.sg and tune in next time for a brand new episode.